I think we'll get it started. You know, I'm not a terribly formal person, but I am wearing a suit today, and I'm going to try to play the part. But it is, I think, of all the presentations, quote unquote, that I give throughout the year in different audiences, this has begun to become my favorite. It is the third time I do it. The first time was completely virtual. And the second time was mixed like this, I think, but everybody was wearing a mask and there was a lot less people in the room. So this year we have more people in the room, less masks. Again, nothing against masks, but it does show that we're slowly moving, and I'm excited about, everybody keeps talking about the new normal. I'm excited to see what that's gonna look like, because I still don't know, right? And I think we won't know until we get there. And today's a little bit about that. It's a little bit about talking about where we are. You know, we're going to take stock. There's lots of positives to take stock of. You know, some challenges that we're going to have to look at as well. But I'm more interested in talking about, you know, the future and how it looks. When we get started, so I want to talk about you know, probably 4 big areas, and then I'll talk a little bit about some other details. But you know, at Mason Science, and that's how we are sort of rebranding ourselves. We take pride in serving our students. We pursue exciting and consequential research. We're driven by access, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we thrive by engaging with our community. I want to kind of stop a little bit on those 4 and then talk about other related items. So let me talk first about our students. You probably don't need to see this, but I've been sharing. So last week I had a meeting with our external advisory board, and I also had our annual academic planning meeting, and trying to understand it. And sometimes, particularly for those of you that are new here, it's actually good to kind of see a little bit, take a little bit of stock of what is it that we do in the teaching space and the academic program. So. We have essentially 11 academic departments, okay, and probably all the departments are represented here today. I chose to kind of color code them, and you may have seen this slide before. But one of the things I remember when I interviewed here, and I interviewed here, I still remember the date. It was January 30th of 2020, pre-pandemic times, okay, And I remember I was asked the question of what 3 priority areas I saw for the college, and at that point I did not know the college at all. I only saw what was on the web at the time. And I remember saying, you know, there's probably 3 big buckets in which I would place the college, and one is the sort of you know, life sciences. You know, that's you know, all the biomedical stuff that we do. There, you know, there's some, you know, and you know, there's plenty of departments and programs, and of course these are somewhat overlapping. You know, there's probably some biology that does life sciences. There's probably some biology that does environmental sciences. So there's a little bit of a mix, right? These are not complete cuts, but definitely, you know, life sciences. Then there was another bucket on environmental sciences, and that's the climate. That's you know, some GGS, some environmental science and policies there. Then the other bucket is like what's referred to as physical sciences, and you know, that's you know, you have chemistry, you have physics, you may have some math in there. It depends, right? And then everything kind of thread together through data and computing, which is something that we're doing a lot of across the college, and then if we sort of fast forward to where we are today, now we have a School of Computing, and this is and that's our conduit to that effort, right? So these are, like, I visualize, you know, how I present ourselves, how I present our college, right? Departments in those buckets, and then we have all the programs, and which is our bread and butter, undergraduate, graduate, certificates, and here is some data in terms of the number, you know, number of new students or number of students that we have in each program, right? So, But more importantly, each student is a story in itself, right? And that's important to remember. And here, we have a few examples of students that have gone through our programs, and they are doing great things from several disciplines. And one thing that I constantly, when I talk to faculty, when I talk to staff, when I talk to other people, is the focus on students. And many of you have heard me say, if at some point you have a doubt as to how you make a decision, think about the students. And if you think about the students, the decision is going to work out itself. Because you're always pulled in a million directions. It's budget, it's a research need, and if you think about the students first, and if we all collectively think about our students first, we will make the right choices. And this is really important because it's sort of the path that we should follow is to continue to serve our students. I always tell people, if you want to do research and you don't care about students, the university is not the right place for you. You can go to national lab, you can go to industry, you can go somewhere else. If you are at a university, even if you want to be fully super research active and you can have a very fulfilling research career, it's got to be student-centered, because that's what's about. And of course, in the classroom, that's even more important. So talk about our students, and I want to show you some data in terms of where we are, right? These are student headcount total and credit hours, right? And because the College of Science serves a lot of other majors, and the credit hours have a big impact on the revenue that we generate. So it's always good to see. There's some clear correlations, but they're not always the same. We went back here to fall of 19, which is sort of the last known pre-COVID conditions, and to fall of 22, which is where we're now. If you look at fall of 22 versus fall of 19, all right? The university, total enrollment, the university went up about 2.6%, fall 19 to fall 22, all right? Growth, 2.6% in headcount and 1.3 in credit hours, okay? That tells you that the university is enrolling more students, but the credit hours haven't kept up, so students may be taking less credit hours, right? So Mason Science, our enrollment kind of followed that trend, 2.4% headcount, and 1% credit hours, okay? A little bit lagging behind the rest of the university, but not completely out of sync. One thing that I want to note, though, this is fall of 22 versus fall of 19. We did spike a little bit in fall of 20 and fall of 21, and in both student headcount and somewhat in credit hours, right? There was a little bit of a dip here in credit hours in 21. The reason why this is relevant is because the way our budget gets decided is year to year. So our budget for fiscal year 23, which is where we're now, is based on the difference between fall of 22 and fall of 21, which means that this year, because of the way the university does its budgeting, our revenue went down. But I don't want to make that a discouraged or make that discouraging news, because I want to take a little bit of a longer view. When we look at pre versus post-pandemic, we've grown, and so has the university. The other revealing factor here is out of state. Look at the out of state numbers. The growth is tremendous, at least in percentage points. For the university, it's 13.5 and 7.7 in headcount and credit hours. And for us, it's higher on both counts. And this tells us that, again, the reason we look at these numbers is that out of state may be a growth opportunity, because there is definitely a demand. Mason it's a Research One university. It's becoming well known. It's becoming more attractive. Therefore, we can market outside of Virginia and be effective. Okay? The same trends, I broke this down into undergraduate and graduate. You can actually see the same numbers, and of course, I'll share the slides for everyone to look at. I don't want to, have this be a supercharged lecture with lots of facts, but it'll be. So undergraduate follows more or less the trend. we actually grew at the undergraduate level faster than the university, both in headcount and in credit hours, and also a lot more in out-of-state at the undergraduate level. That's an opportunity, okay? In graduate, the numbers are kind of follows a little bit of the same trend, but that's where we're lacking a little bit. If you look at where the university grew, this is graduate credit hours, almost 8% headcount, 11 credit hours. We only grew 0.5% headcount, and we actually decreased in credit hours at the graduate level. That's work that we need to do, okay? But again, good news out of state. There's still a lot of growth, not as big as the university. The university is growing gangbusters. An out-of-state graduate. A lot of people are doing, accelerate masters, all sorts of creative graduate programs. That's something that we may be lagging a little behind. Okay, and it's gonna come out as we discuss this further. But all in all, when we look at our enrollment, it is strong. It has grown. We have continued to grow, and I can tell you, it is not the same story across the country. It is not the same story across other institutions in Virginia. Ugly slide. Every speaker is allowed to have one, right? These are some of the projections, and this is really data pulled out of the central system that the university uses to project. But I just wanted to point out a couple of things. So when we look at fall of 23, so that's next year, we're expected to grow roughly in terms of headcount, and that's the projection for next year. Okay, 1.8, 1.9% headcount, and credit hours, undergraduate and graduate. And graduate we're projected to grow, and these numbers tend to be fairly spot on because they're really based on actual data that we've received through both algorithmic projections as well as projections of graduates that are applying. So I expect, and the reason I wanted to show this is that I expect this growth to somewhat continue at least for a year or two, and I'll show you a little bit more data to back that up. Talk about research, which is always fun, right? Our position as an R1 research university, it's getting stronger. Roughly our awards for fiscal year 22 were $37 million. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I've been taking a close look at number of proposals, funding by proposal, and funding level by proposal. And my conclusion is that we are a collection of very, very smart, very, very entrepreneurial and successful researchers. We're just not hitting in terms of volume. We're hitting the 5-figure, the 6 figures. We're hitting them well. 7 figures are scarce. 8 figures are non-existent. If we're going to go to a next level and to jump from 37, there's a 37 here that's not showing. If you want to go from 37 to 50 to 60, we're going to have to capture one of these 8-figure Moby Dicks, okay? And that is going to be captured through engaging in large-scale collaborations with other institutions, with other colleges. That's the piece where I see that our R1 status is on the path to achieve, so that it ranks as well as other R1. That's where Virginia Tech is. That's where UVA is. That's where University of Maryland is. We need to make that jump. That's where we are. Okay. Some figures here in terms of proposals and awards. And again, going back 5 years, if you look at our expenditures, this is fiscal year 19, 34, 32, 33, 37. We're like there. We're like, in that pattern that we're in the mid to high 30s, but not quite breaking from that. And here are some projections based on for 23 and 24, based on what's already in the pipeline in terms of awards and how we're spending, but also likelihood of proposal hits based on history. So I think we'll continue crawling up. That might be optimistic, but I think we're on that path. So just to put it in the context of, again, the university, for fiscal year 22 expenditures for Mason, roughly $214 million, okay? We are roughly 20% of that, okay? A little bit less than 20, but that's about where we are. One thing that my dear colleague Pat Gilibet keeps reminding me, and I looked it up and it's very, very true, is that we are the college that generates the most indirect for the university. And this is important, and you know why I know it's important, and why I know it's real too, is because the college that's funded more than us, the only college, is engineering and computing. They've achieved their growth in research by engaging in these multi-institution big collaborations, which have a lot of pass-throughs, right? So it's great. Listen, I did this at Maryland, so I know this trick, right? You want to grow your numbers, you do these pass-throughs, your numbers go up, but your indirect doesn't, because you have to pass through the indirect too, okay? So we are doing what I would call, in terms of research and awards, we are the real deal. We are doing the work, we are chasing it, we're writing the proposals, we're getting the awards, and we're executing. We're not passing through anything, okay? And that's actually an achievement. If we're gonna go to a next level, we're gonna have to keep that. I mean, I wanna keep that, right? I wanna keep that identity, but I wanna start chasing larger whales as well, okay? So, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that a little bit later. So what's the growth strategy there? Interdisciplinary collaboration. So again, collaborating between departments in the college, with other colleges, with other institutions. Doing international work. I think there's opportunities there. And try to get engaged in large research initiatives. Okay, that's what's going to give us even if they're pass-throughs. Okay, I'm willing to compromise on the pass-throughs if we can get more bulk research dollars for the college. Again, each of these research awards, each of these research grants that we've received has a student story behind them. There's a student that works in a GRA, getting their degrees, doing their research, and then going on and doing great things out there in the world. This is the legacy of this research, is these students, okay? And we have students involved in across the board, Quantum Science and Engineering Center, and faculty involved in doing research with the Virginia Climate Center, faculty supervising interns and students through ASIP, which is a wonderful program, and the students, right? And we can tell a story about each of these students and be really mesmerized about that impact. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about a Jedi, because I think a Jedi to me is going to be the secret sauce that makes us really different. Because we're not going to out Maryland, or we're not going to out Virginia, we're not going to out Virginia Tech. Okay, we have to create our own way of growing our enterprise. And the secret sauce that we have is right in front of us. It's our students, okay? First and foremost, you're going to see some data. It's our faculty, and it's our interest as an institution to embrace a Jedi as an identity and branding ourselves around that. I'll tell you, the university is making great efforts to do this. And if you look at the university strategic plan, if you look at President Washington's since day one push for what used to be called, or probably still called, inclusive excellence, or DIE or DEI, we're calling it a Jedi, we're owning it, and we're exporting it to the rest of the colleges and across the institution. And this is the secret sauce that I was referring to, is the fact that we continue to be an astoundingly female-dominated undergraduate student body in the sciences, this is freaking amazing. And I'll tell you just so I know, across the river at Maryland, this number is just starting to touch 30%. We're more than twice that, okay? At the graduate level, we're also majority female. This is also great. We're almost 50% minority represented. That's important. Lots of other things at identity, 29% transfers, 16%, which is pretty large for first generation. Most universities around this area are single digits. So this is our thing, right? This is who we are. This is the community that surrounds us. This is Fairfax, this is Northern Virginia, this is Southern Maryland, this is DC, and the people that we're able to attract. And you've heard the president say this, right? Mason already looks like the rest of the country is going to look 20, 30 years from now. We are already there. This is our advantage. This is how we can catch up and beat the crap out of all the other institutions that are around us. And this is what we want to do. I'm sorry I said beat the crap because it got recorded, but here we go. It's the middle class Miami in me that you really can't shake off. So this is to me, and this is why AJEDA, I think, is an important framing for what we'll do next, is because to me, this is the way that we become unique. We are the most diverse university in Virginia already. We're one of the top 10 diverse institutions in the United States, and I would actually posit that if we counted diversity a little bit different, we'd be the top. Because if an institution in Florida or in Texas, if they are 83% Hispanic, yeah, but your population is 90% Hispanic. So we're not like that. We've been diverse, but actually building off, a diverse group of people and a diverse group of individuals. Not only at our students, also in our faculty. In our faculty, we have work to do. But it's not just the fact that the population that we serve looks like that. It's that the market forces are driving us to that. When we look at potential growth in undergraduate education, it will be on the underrepresented groups. That is the group that's growing. That is the group that has slowly built up its economic capacity and its socioeconomic conditions in our society, and now they have aspirational goals in their education. That's where the growth is, and we are serving that population. There's a big case to make in terms of workforce development. Every single company that we go talk to, when I talked last week to our external advisory board, which has a broad cross-section of individuals from industry and government, they are thirsty for this diversity. They're thirsty for AJEDA. They want to know. They recognize this as a value-added proposition, and this is what we can offer. Some data is there, and I shamelessly stole some of these slides from Paula, and thanks for putting them together. But still, when you look at the workforce, the STEM workforce, right? Look at the groups, and this is across the board. It's not only just STEM in general. I mean, actually, if you look at individual fields, you see the same trends. It is still overwhelmingly not diverse. The opportunity there is big, because these numbers are going to start going down. These numbers are going to start going up, and we have access to that body of students. And also, we have great things going on. We are, we have to confess. I mean, I have to confess that, I've been learning about what AJEDA is, and trying to educate myself, and trying to understand the different concepts. I think we all have to do that if we're going to be successful in this enterprise. Not only because it's just being a good citizen, and that there's part of that too, is that we will be more effective in our teaching, in our research, in our service, if we engage in this more actively. And fortunately, we are investing in putting together trainings and opportunities to learn more about this. So we have lots of stuff lined up that I'm sure Paula in due time will let you know, and not only for faculty and staff, but also for students, lots of opportunities to better understand how we relate to each other and how we interact with each other as people in this age, because it is different. Okay, everybody who has any gray hair like I do has seen the changes in a very short period of time, and I consider myself pretty. What's the word I'm looking for? Pretty interested in learning about these things, and I'm always challenged to try to do it. So this is, but I understand that if we're going to be effective in taking the college to where it needs to go, we're going to have to do it this, okay? And then engaging with the community, which is a little bit of a corollary. So being at Mason is not interacting with our students or with faculty or staff or other colleges. It's really is understanding the community around us. And that community now is not just Northern Virginia. I think that community is starting to get larger and larger because we're looking at the entire world, right? And we have, the good news is that we have so many good things going already. One of the most pleasant experiences that I had when I joined here is to see how much stuff was going on with Focus, for example, just females of color underrepresented in science program, with the ASIP, which I continue to be fascinated by. It's a program that was created in the College of Science, but now other colleges want in big time, right? Certainly engineering has been tagging along. Now the business school wants in. It is a very great way to connect with that new or upcoming generation of students. Our STEM Accelerator, probably a very unique experience nationwide. It's also a gem, and we want to make sure that we nurture it, that we expand it, and that we export it. And it's something that we're seriously also interested in, because again, this is part of our identity. It's not just about accelerating STEM, it's about accelerating STEM with the students that we have and that they're upcoming. Again, bringing the AJEDI together. I could stop at every one of these and tell stories. Each of these programs is really exciting. And finally, just activities to expand awareness. One of the things that and you've heard me say this is I am by nature a bragger. You like bragging, right? But it's very easy to brag when you're doing great things. And so I'm always eager to hear about faculty, about students, about your experiences, about what you're doing that's great, because it gives me a talking point for my next meeting. Recently we did Space Day. That was a lot of fun. We had an extraordinarily talented astronaut here that came, and Peter, we had 1,000 students, 1,000 people here that day, probably more. That was fantastic. This is me promoting Mason in Spanish radio. Yes, I do speak Spanish. Lots of activities around engaging Mason Science Series and engaging with students, with the community. I think, part of our success is if we try to capitalize on the fact that we are really a community-based university. I mean, in a way, and it's probably because of the way Mason evolved from being like a commuter school that Mason alumni are so excited about Mason. They're so excited about it, so proud about their achievements, and people that, one of our board members graduated 40 years ago from biology. And he just tells you stories about how Mason used to be, and it's really fascinating. There's a lot of pride in being a patriot. There's a lot of pride in being a patriot in the sciences. So I think we have to capitalize on that and get further engaged with the community. Needless to say, our graduates are in high demand across the board: federal sector, state sector, non-governmental, private industry. Lots of opportunities not only for employment and workforce, but also for engaging alumni, because a lot of people in this area are alumni and have these relationships. I want to have this graph made just to understand. Sometimes so how many people are we? We're 1,000 strong. When you look across faculty and staff, and that's a little bit of a breakdown of we are instructional faculty and teaching assistants and student wage, classified staff here. About 1,000 people. That's about our size. Just in case we have this data also broken down by, thanks to the work of our team, broken down in different categories in terms of diversity. Also try to understand how we look, right? But I just want to give you like a number, so this is not obvious to many people. Some more figures that I wanted to show, and this one is particularly relevant, is fundraising and advancement, because it's the university, as you have probably heard, President Washington and Provost Ginsburg, others, we are entering we're actually already in a capital campaign. Target is to, I've heard figures, but target is to raise about $1 billion in 5 to 8 years, and President Washington says closer to 5 than to 8, right? We have been given, more or less, not officially, we have been giving our fundraising target. And the fundraising target, if you look at if you look at the last 10 years, we've been kind of oscillating, but our average is roughly about 850K when you look at the last 10 years. We had a great year, like a super great year last year, record. But our funding target per year for the next 5 or 6 years is higher than that maximum. So that's going to involve a lot of our efforts, particularly a lot of my efforts. And the reason this is important is because I'll show you some of our budget numbers. If you look at our enrollment and the projected growth in enrollment, we're, for the kind of things we want to do and to become a less an institution that is better resourced than we are, and that we actually desperately need, this is going to be an important part, because this is a source of funding that allows you to do some creative things. In terms of our budget, I wanted to just give you a little bit of a big picture of where we are. I tell people that we, just to round it off, we are roughly a $100 million per year operation, give or take. 60% of that, so about 60 million now, it's what's referred to as our quote unquote permanent budget. It's not permanent because it gets reduced, right? But this is the combination of funds provided by the state per student, also tuition and other sources of revenue. And then we have about expenditures around 40 million, depending on how you account the subcontracts and the expenditures. But roughly, we're about $100 million per year. The research awards tend to be come and go, right? So you get them and you spend them. There's a lag, but that's not permanent budget. That's why we separate it out. So last year, between July of 21 and between July of 20 and June of 21, we carried off about $2 million. So this is the difference between our spending authority and what we spent at the end. We are allowed to carry a percentage of that forward, right? And that becomes an important source of funds for a lot of things we do. And I know with a lot of faculty, with a lot of the chairs, with a lot of the center directors, we talk about one-time funds. That's what that is, right? So that number grew this year to about 6.7 million, from 2 to 6, which means that our budget actually grew during that period, our spending authority, and we didn't quite execute it all. So, but now, the state, and particularly this new administration at the state level, is looking very carefully at these carry forwards, and we're being asked to manage our cash flow in a more up-to-date way. Okay, and so we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I just want to give you a little bit of big picture where we are. So this is a little bit of summary. So enrollment has grown across the board, with probably a tiny exception in the graduate. Our research expenditures are roughly at this level now, at least for this year. A growth strategy comprises interdisciplinary collaborations, industry, international, large research initiative. There's lots of opportunities in non-traditional areas that we haven't quite explored. We have to invest in staffing up advancement to reach and exceed our Mason campaign goals. And our financials are pretty solid, but the expenditure planning needs to be framed and managed around a strategic plan. And those last two words, strategic plan, is something I want to talk a little bit about today, because so how long has the College of Science been in existence? Anyone of the old timers? 12 years?
Yeah. You looking at me like I'm an old timer?
No.
Okay, we'll give it 12 years.
12 years, okay.
I'm an old timer.
So we've been operating over 12 years. We have never had a strategy. We have never had a strategic plan. That's truth. It explains actually a lot of the things that we saw, right? We've been very successful in spite of not having a plan, okay? And having a plan is important because it streamlines everything and makes you more efficient, okay? It directs your efforts. It prioritizes. So that explains particularly on the spending. You know, I've been here now enough time to tell you that the way our budgets are crafted, assigned, and spent, it's still very, very haphazard. We have to be more disciplined about this, right? So it's just a little bit self-criticism, but let's talk a little bit about next steps and what comes after this. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenges, and I'll start by saying let's talk about first the kind of programmatic challenges. The climate change, biodiversity, infectious disease, energy, water, food, and others. I can tell you this is a list taken from the Global Grand Challenges list. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, if we look at any list that has been done about what are the challenges of humanity, I tell you, our college has a gigantic footprint on this. From these 9, I can tell you the top 5 that's our baby. Okay? We're doing something related to each of these things. We are doing work of consequence, both on the research phase and on the teaching space. But then there are other challenges that are not programmatic, they're not intellectual, that are perhaps more urgent and more real in some ways, right? One is this so-called enrollment cliff, and I'll show you a figure in a second. The value proposition of higher ed is in question. I tell people that higher ed is under assault, and that's something that we have to be aware of. Mental health crisis, a funding model that's challenged, right? Is the 4-year packaging of an undergraduate education still the best model, right? I mean, these are all valid questions. They're worth a discussion, but these things will define how we evolve into the future. Freaking Google, what's up with that? Screw Apple, right? Also, right? So, again, screw Google. Enough said that. Enough that said. I was going to say another word, but I'm being recorded, so I'm going to behave here. Then the other thing is that when you look at not the next immediate years, but the 5 years towards the end of this decade, right? You can project pretty much the number of high school graduates in each state, and you can see some of the numbers here. You can see some, where there's a lot of decrease, with some exceptions here in the East Coast, but there's quite a bit of decrease across the country. The nice thing about this data is that it sort of allows us to try to understand where, if you couple just the big numbers, but also where the diversity pockets are, you can actually make a very intelligent decision about where you want to recruit, particularly out of state. Main conclusion here is that there will be fewer white students and more Hispanics. And that's an area that we need to tackle. Also, a greater range of academic abilities. You know, fewer high scores on SAT or ACT, and also with socioeconomics that indicate stagnant economic income. So here's the enrollment cliff, right? And this is in Virginia, right? This is high school graduates. And we'll continue to grow. We're right here, see? And this actually mimics our growth in enrollment. If you think about the last 3 or 4 years, we're on this growing limb here a little bit, right? We're there, we're growing. And this tells us that maybe for the next few years, we'll continue to grow. That's good news. But then, you know, let me stand here so I can project correctly. In right about when then that 2025, 2026, when those data start hitting, this thing's going to stagnate and then come down. So we need to start planning ahead to manage this. And I don't say, and you've heard me say this before as well, I don't think that we can just grow forever. If anything, the second law of thermodynamics prohibits that, right? It's just not possible. But what we can do is we can manage this, okay? And right size ourselves and be efficient so that we can continue to serve our students. There's lots of perturbations around this. Pandemic was a big one. There's a lot of social unrest, economic unrest. There's lots of other factors that will play into this game that may be harder to predict. But I think if we adopt an attitude of doing a lot of preemptive planning, which is where we might be going with this, I think we'll be able to handle this. I'm confident about that. Here are some realities, and this is for the entire university. So but some of the trends that we're seeing in the data from the College of Science mimic this. This is tuition. This here are fees. This is enrollment. Undergraduate, this is enrollment graduate. Let me look at undergraduate tuition. Green is Mason, right? We're here. We are, other than ODU, we're the lowest tuition charging institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Okay? That's tuition. This is fees, and fees were, with the exception of, I think this is William and Mary up here, but we're in the ballpark. Okay? Look at undergraduate enrollment. This is us. Boom, 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 boom. We are right toe-to-toe with Virginia Tech. Okay? Undergraduate enrollment. With this tuition profile, with this mandatory fees profile. Look at graduate enrollment here. Again, we're up here. Okay? When you put these together, we are the best bang for buck in the state, period, right? But this is another reality. So this is the contribution of funds per in-state undergraduate FTE. Mason, right? And this data has been shared, has been posted, has been discussed. I don't think this is going to change. And this, what this means, I mean, it's difficult to understand or to justify why an FTE in Mason is worth to the state less than all the others. Okay? And yes, the legislature keeps telling us that they're going to look at this, that they're aware of this, that something's going to be done about it. Okay? Maybe something will be done about it, but I'm not going to live forever. All right? And I'm not sure I want to wait. I'm not terribly patient. So I'm not counting on that. But this tells you a little bit about reality, right? And why, for example, things like advancement fundraising are so important, so critical. because we do complement stipends, we do complement tuition of students with those funds. There's lots of things that we do. There's some programs that are experiencing enrollment growth, and these are some examples. These are programs that are growing, and this is cool, right? Computational data sciences. I know Jason keeps telling this to me, and he keeps sending me weekly emails about their growth. So I'm painfully aware of this, right? Rightfully so I'm not criticizing. This is good, keep it on my radar. And climate science, computational biology, computation. There's a theme here, right? Computational, right? Okay. That's that core that I was referring to initially in how the school is configured. PhDs overall are growing. This is good news, okay? We have to fund them better. That's another reason to raise our revenue, because that's a big limitation. Every single individual that I've spoken in this college tells me that increased funding for PhDs is a priority. I agree with you completely. The data shows it also. And there are programs that are, not doing so hot, right? That we also have to recognize. Pretty much all BAs are either not growing. And this is not to say, this is where we take the axe and start cutting stuff. No, but these are opportunities to collaborate with perhaps other colleges, other institutions, and share resources to deliver these programs. And we are having conversations with William and Mary, and with Mary Washington, and with other institutions in the state to maybe share some of these programs so that we can be more efficient overall. So our strategic planning effort, the next 5 years, and I'm really counting starting next year because it'll take us a year to actually roll it out, is answering the question of not who we are. We spend a lot of time here on who we are. We got that, right? Who do we want to be? And that's an open question, right? We can decide we don't want to grow anymore, all right? Or we can decide we want to grow in certain areas and not others, or we can chart the path that we choose to. I think the important thing is that we choose it rationally, and that's going to be the conversation that we're going to start having, that we've already started. It's setting a vision, goals, and strategies, actions for the next 5 years, that period of time. Re-envisioning our college culture, how we operate, diversify and expand revenue sources. That's always going to be good. No matter how we do it, it's always good to try to expand your revenue sources. Pump up our advancement and establish our brand of Mason Science, right? The university is almost completed. I hear it's going to be released any day now. You've probably seen versions of it already, depending on which lists you're on. I've seen some versions of the plan. It has these 5 priorities. That's the university's plan. And if you look at them, this is students, this is research, this is socioeconomic impact, this is diversity, equity, inclusion. Paul, they're still calling it DEI. You're going to go slap them. Invest in faculty and staff success. Not in any particular order. Those are the 5 priorities that are laid out. Okay? We're going to have to come up with some of these priorities. And having some alignment with the university's plan is good, right? And that's not bad, right? So I did a little bit of soul searching and trying to see, okay, if I were to put something to paper, so this is the dean's list of goals, right? This is probably not where we're going to land, but it'll tell you where my head is, right, in terms of this. And also not in any order of priority except for the very first one. Again, I think we have to build a college culture of a Jedi that permeates through our entire academic enterprise. Because like I said, that's our secret sauce. That's what's going to make us different. It's not just that we do research and we teach, but we do it differently, okay? Our student body looks different, this area looks different, and the country is on its way to look different. So I think this needs to frame everything else in a way. improve the student experience. We have to do a better job. You've heard me say this in terms of not only recruiting and enrolling, but advising and being there for our students. You know, I like to use the word never abdicate our responsibility to students. That's the thing that we do. That's why we're here. Okay? There are many places. You are all smart, brilliant people that could be employed anywhere. There's a reason you're here. And that reason is students. Okay. Yes, we have to make working conditions for faculty and staff better. And we're working on it. We're investing. The university is investing. The college is investing as well. It doesn't happen as quickly as anyone wants because there are all sorts of processes. And I also like to remember people that every single one of us here is an employee of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the Commonwealth of Virginia has lots of rules. And we are public servants, officially. So there's things we can do, there's things we can't. But we are making progress. I'll tell you, the needle has moved a lot more than I'm sure it moved in years before. And we'll continue pushing that very strongly. Not only on compensation, but on the overall package. I want to make working conditions for everyone better. And I'll give you one example where I think I've adopted a little bit of a more flexible approach than the rest of the university. If you have friends in other colleges, ask them how flexible, particularly staff, ask them about flexibility in terms of schedules and being on campus, how many days a week, etc. I've tried to adopt, and I've discussed this extensively with chairs and with my staff and with you. I'll be more flexible because I think the future is going to be that, and I don't want to be driven into the future kicking and screaming. I'd rather be in front of the bus, trying to dictate or trying to define what the new normal is going to be like. And we will continue doing that. Yes, we got to expand our research portfolio. I'm not sure how much, so I'm not a growth crazy or growth for the sake of growth itself. I say it because more research funding leads to more funding for grad students. It leads to more funding for summer salaries. It needs to more indirect that we can invest in other places. So it is a revenue source that I think we have the opportunity to grow. And we'll be trying to come up with ways to do that. And again, this is my list, but we'll come up with a list for the college based on the discussions. And leverage our academic activities to foster partnerships and essentially strengthen our ties with the community, which I think it's really, really important. And also, it makes you feel like you belong, right? Which I think is a big deal, particularly in these times where the pandemic sort of shook us out of our mojo, right? So we'll be working on the strategic plan through summer, maybe of 23. I hope it doesn't take us that long. We're going to be continuing to invest in staff and faculty to better serve our students. Okay. We're going to strive to advance our AJEDI goals and initiatives and engage in our capital campaign. I mean, these are the things that are in the horizon immediately. And last but not least, we have become an increasingly interconnected world. Please share our success stories. When you see a story about a certain student getting a scholarship or certain faculty getting some research funding or some staff receiving an award, amplify that through your networks, please. It's a way to show our pride, but it also gets out there. It gets us better noticed, so that that undergraduate student sitting somewhere in Miami can see, oh, Mason, maybe I can go there, right? So that's what I had. So I'll shut up again. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the 2 years, 4 or 5 months that I've been dean have been professionally probably the most fun I've had in my life. It's been challenging. It's challenging every day. But it's, my wife made the comment, so we went, it's just an anecdote. So we were at a fundraising social a couple of weeks ago. My wife was with me, and she had not met, at that point, she had not met President Washington. So I sort of spot him, somewhere. I said, let me introduce you to the president. So we go there, and she says hello, and then he asks her directly, so how's your husband doing? She asks her, he doesn't ask me. He typically says, how are you doing, And then my wife said something revealing that we had not talked about it in the 2+ years I've been here. And she said she's never seen me as excited to do the work that I do. And I mean, we've been married for 32 years. So take that with whatever, take that with whatever sense of I feel like I belong. And it's been great. It's a privilege to work with you. And I'll continue doing my best to serve you. This is a position in which you serve. I never seen the dean position as a power trip. To me, it's more about really, I mean, it gives me a sense of satisfaction when I can push the needle a little bit and something happens because of something I was able to do. And by some standards, I could be considered a great teacher or a great researcher. Yeah, and it's cool. I like it. It's my trade. But this has given me an additional dimension to what I do daily. So thank you very much for that. And we got lots of work to do. Like I pointed out, I want to do it with you. I think I'll shut up now before I get too emotional. So it's a Miami thing, right? So yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So this question came in from Fatah Kashanchi while you were talking about enrollment. So his question is, I feel that summer timelines are largely underutilized at Mason and in the College of Science. Can we open up times during summers to enroll students for classes and lab courses?
Yeah, I mean, my gut sense, and so this falls in the category of questions that I don't know the answer to. But I see no issues unless there's some university or state-imposed constraint. So I would punt this question to Cody or to Donna, or someone that is more knowledgeable about rules and the things that prevent us from doing something like that. I hope that answer is at least sincere. So.
I'll ask one more, and then if anyone in the
Sure.
room has a question. There's a long setup to this question, but I want to read it so that it gives the question context.
Sure.
This is from Kathleen Hunt. She said, having done research at other R1s, increasing grant success and improving the ability of each PI to go for the large grants will require specific improvements in both Mason's infrastructure and Mason's ability to free up more PI time. And she kind of goes through some of the challenges. And her question is, does College of Science have specific plans to address some of these PI support and infrastructure issues where we are lagging other Peer 1 institutions?
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a fantastic question. And we, so the short answer is that we've started laying out a level of analysis that would allow us to address this in a more detail. So one of the things that we have in the college and at Mason in general, but specific to this college, that is quite limiting is that the assignment of workload is very, very rigid. And I don't think it has to be that way. We started to do an analysis essentially. I mean, to me, let me tell you what my philosophy is. So I'll give you the end answer so I don't have to extend too much. Workload needs to be tailored to each individual faculty and each individual staff because each of us has their own abilities and each of us have their own ways they can contribute. But right now it's like, well, if you're term, you're 4 and 4. If you're tenure track, you're 2 and 2. It doesn't matter if you're super research active and then you can buy out, which I personally completely hate. that approach. That's something that's not shared by a lot of people, including the provost, and we've had very candid discussions about this. But to me, we need to have a workload, particularly for faculty, just getting back to that specific question. We need to have a workload that's more flexible, that allows individuals who are, research active, or maybe have a large grant or writing a large proposal, to have a workload that's more flexible, that will allow them to take on those obligations, right? That means basically, that can mean that someone else is going to have to pick up the slack. Maybe that's the case. But again, if we can assign the workload in a more flexible fashion, it allows us to optimize the allocation of resources. So to me, that's the model that we want to go for, and I do expect that to show up in the strategic plan. And one thing I want to say about the strategic plan is that I promised that I'm going to be very hands-off in terms of prescribing, but there's some times when I'm going to have to stick my fingers and say, hey, this needs to be there. And this is one of those things that, flexible workload needs to be there, because otherwise we're not going to break this pattern. Yep.
And my specific question is about growth, because since the beginning of your presentation, you have fortunately mentioning growth many, many times. Of course, it's motivating. Growth feels good, sounds good, but it needs to be specified what kind of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And how about quality? Quality of the faculty, quality of teaching, quality of research, awards. How many awards do we get at the university, and what kind of awards? And how many publications have been produced? What's the trend?
Yeah.
Are we growing? Are we targeting actually renowned journals? So is it possible to have some statistics, some information about our collective progress in not just expenditure in terms of money, but also the content? How about our reputation?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. I would be very curious about these aspects.
I think we have lots of data on that. I'm not sure if we have all the data but I know we've been gathering publications and impact factors of journals, and I think someone, Dieter, I'm going to put you on the spot. I remember at some point you had made a calculation about the H index of the College of Science as a whole. Things like this, right? Am I representing this correctly, or?
No, we just try to get everything on Google Scholar.
Right. Right. Yeah. So there's some efforts, right? And I'm right. So I've spoken primarily. Well, implicitly I talked about quality as well, but I may not have mentioned it, verbally. But I did speak a lot about quantities, right? And yes, I agree that the growth needs to be on quality as well, the improvements, and that's why I also pose the caveat that I'm not convinced. I just don't know. We're going to have to decide this collectively. How much do we want to grow? I think the demographics can tell us that in enrollment we can probably grow easily, 5 more years, at least in enrollment, right? Is that something we want to do, or do we want to be a little bit more deliberate about that? I just, we need to have that conversation. So each of these points that you're making is a very valuable contribution to the strategic plan. And it goes to answer that question that I posed in that slide. Can we go back 2 or 3 slides to the strategic plan? Who do we want to be? That's what we need to answer. And that's why this process is so important. Because we've been going on for 12 years and we haven't had one. All what has happened, which is great, all that I can brag about today has happened, it's like I know the chemists have a term for this. It's like, it's molecules exploding. I'm not a chemist, so, but it's with lots of entropy, right? With lots of entropy, right? So, lots of entropy. Entropy is good. Let's try to manage entropy.
Antti Baranov, School of Systems Biology. I will ask a perennial question. I'm here already for 20 years in George Mason, and that question was discussed 20 years ago when I was at my first faculty meeting here. It was different college of Arts and Science, which preceded College of Science. And we at that time discussed as being transitioned from primarily undergraduate university to university with very well developed graduate programs. That was a goal and vision at that time, and we achieved this vision is that the faculty would be having their individualized sections which they teach in lab rotations, projects, thesis, proposal preparing, credits, etc., which is actually individual interaction with the students, takes a lot of time, but it's a high quality time, right? So that's that mentorship time which counting for progress of our students in their career and for the lifetime. That's what they remember more than classes. And till now, it is not counting really toward teaching loads. We have 2, and then it was all peppered by those individual sections, like bric-a-brac, as we actually do that. But right now, I think myself, I have about 100 credits every year in those individual sections, and there are faculties who have more than me, and it didn't count toward 2 by 2. And of course our chairs are of course informally accounting that, and that's a really great thing. Thank you for them for doing this, but we really need to do something at the level of college about that. So I'm asking you this perennial question. I hope you will have some answer to this.
Yeah, listen, so it's you're preaching to the choir, because I understand exactly what you're saying. I think we are at a level where what we know needs to be done, right? It's not completely understood by the individuals that fund our universities. So that's why I keep reminding ourselves that we are constrained by what the state of Virginia wants to do, right? And how they want to fund us. So so what we can do, and this is what I'm hoping that we can achieve, and this is why this is part of the plan that I kind of sketched out, is that we want to have a workload for individual faculty that is reflective of these things that you talk about, right? And that's not just a rigid 2-2, that if you have a class with 100 students and a class with 5 students is the same thing, right? Or that if you're supervising, mentoring, 5-6 undergrads, that's not counted anywhere. That's actually it's real time. It's really important, and we have to find a way to account for that, right? So so this is where we have to look at our workload in a much more rational way and more individualized way. Sometimes it's simple to say, the fair thing to do is that all faculty are treated equally, so every faculty is going to be assigned this load, etc. But when you do that, you miss a lot. So to me, fairness means that every faculty gets as close to an operating model to what you are best to do. Because maybe there's another faculty that looks at what you're doing and says, hell no, I don't want to do that. I want to do this other thing, right? I want to find a way to try to accommodate these two things, right? Or these many things. So that's where I want to get to. Yes, Phil.
This is Phil Young from GGS. I have 2 questions. Both of them are related to strategic planning. You have this slide on. So first is that you mentioned the university has a objective to get about 1 billion in 5 to 7 years or 8 years. So what is our current strategy for making that or contributing a bigger share to that? We do have a lot of companies, a lot of agencies, a lot for-profit organizations close by, but it's a good opportunity.
No, I think so. The unofficial target that was given to us was 15 million over 6 years. So that's 2.5 per year. Right? Last year we did 1.9, so we're good. And so we have to do more than what we're doing and sustainably, right? So that means there is, and I've been asking this question because I've been trying to learn about fundraising and how people do it, and I hang out with fundraisers and other organizations and NGOs that do this very well, and this is really about muscle. It is really about having more people that do this for a living. And every calculation that I've seen, investment in fundraising pays itself very, very quickly. So if you hire, let's say, 3 people to do fundraising for the college, you're going to get a lot more of that in spades in terms of the return that you get, right? Now, we're not doing this in isolation, right? So it's not like the president said, you guys go raise 15 million and I'll forget about you, come back later. We are doing this in a concerted effort throughout the university. So there's going to be a lot of investment, not only from us in the college, but also from the central university to staff us up. We need to staff up. We have Audrey, we have Marie, which is half-time and graduating, and then she's going to do something else in spite of me trying to beg her to stay. And I'm a good beggar. And then we lost Stephen Janella, who left us recently. We have a fraction of Caitlin. Where's Caitlin? There she is, a fraction of Caitlin, right? That's it. That's it. So we need to staff up. That's why that's there.
I guess a lot of point is really to link the staff with the top science discoveries or research we have in the college. So a lot of question I have is that you showed the 4 pillars in the college. In the center, you have data and computing, which is catalyzing the attractive of students, many of them. If you look at the computational or the engineering schools, their students, like computer science, they were double almost every year over there.
Yep.
So what's a strategy in our college to utilize the data and computing to kind of as a magnet, so the departments could work together to attract
that's
students?
why I put data and computing at the core, right? Because I think the physical sciences, the environmental sciences, the life sciences need to be threaded together through computing and data, because that's what the market is telling us, right? That's where the demands are from students. That's where the good paying jobs are for students. And we also have a school of computing, as you probably know. It hasn't quite taken off at the speed that everybody's thinking, but we do have that. And to me, that's the conduit to the school of computing. So, and we've been having these conversations. So
we're going to jump to a couple of online
Yes,
questions,
please.
and then we have a few more in the room.
Please.
So I'm going to kind of combine these two questions because they're related. So what time commitment comes with your new director appointment at PNNL? How will this and your other external commitments affect your leadership for the College of Science?
Yeah, so hopefully, that's a great question. I appreciate it. So to answer specifically the question, it's, I would say it's probably going to be something like between 5 and 10% of my time. It doesn't bother me as much in terms of affecting my, my ability to do my job. So I'll give you one example. So last year, so the fiscal year 22, I had a what's called an IPA appointment, an Intergovernmental Personnel Act appointment with NASA. So NASA paid Mason for half of my time. I don't think they got half of my time, but they certainly got more than 10% during the year. And as far as I know, our college goals were met. We just had an academic planning exercise with the president and the provost. They were very happy. I think our enrollment numbers, our research numbers, I think, if you ask me if I think I'm doing my job, I think I am. I think, however, and let me tell you why this one with PNNL is important. One of the areas of growth that I see in terms of intellectual programmatic research is energy in general. Mason does not have a footprint in energy. We have a little bit going on in engineering as well as here, but that's not an area where we're strong, okay? PNNL invests $600 million per year in outside funding, outside research funding. That's a gigantic opportunity. I'm actually courting them to bring some of that stuff to Mason. So part of my job, however, and just to round up the answer a little bit, is if you were to ask President Washington, he has told us, deans, I expect you to spend at least 50% of your time outside of the university, shaking trees, right? I think I'm doing that, right? So I have a great team supporting me across the board, from advancement to marketing to AJEDI to academic affairs, the whole bit. So I'm pretty confident that there's going to be no effect, right? And I also, one more thing, I also hold other such appointments. University of Florida, Colorado School of Mines, Nature Conservancy. And I've had those since I've been here, so, you do the math.
So one other similar question. Can you explain how the senior associate dean has time for the necessary leadership obligations with his split appointment leading the Front Royal campus and its Smithsonian interconnections?
Yeah, listen, it's a great question. I think, one of the things that you'll hear Provost Ginsburg say a lot these days is that collectively, I think the paradigm of time allocation is changing, and I think you can ask the question is how is possible that so-and-so is doing these many things with these, my favorite phrase, with having these many hats, right? Yeah, listen, we live in a world and we live in an institution where having multiple hats is reality. As long as I don't see things falling onto the rails, which was happening when I got here and shortly after, I think we've got the workload under control. So I don't have any concerns. But one of the things that the provost likes to say is that we need to become an institution where we increasingly have shared responsibilities, sharing resources, and he's pitching that quite a bit, which means in the case of, for example, in the case of Cody, and also in the case of Ali and the Libby, which is in the same, in a little bit in the same boat, they are sharing responsibilities with the provost's office. Ali is working on the medical school, Cody is working on being associate provost for Sustainable Earth, and among those things, the Front Royal campus. I'm doing a NASA IPA. It may not look like it used to look years back, but as long as we had the job done, I see no issues. So, and we'll keep an eye out, and you've heard me say this as well, right? I think we're 1,000 strong. We need to have each other's backs. If someone's overloaded, I'm sure someone else can pitch in and help. And I think we can get there together. So.
Yes. Hi, I'm Alexandra. I'm from the biology department. I'm going to change the tone just a moment here. Some of this has been nagging me for quite some time. Going back to your slide on the STEM Accelerator program, I'm a big supporter of that program and all that they do for not only our students, but for incoming middle school and high school students as well. Perhaps I need to be better informed, but over the summer I worked with the focus group for the girls of middle school, high school girls of color. They were fabulous, and I want to know what we are doing to keep them, to lure them to come to Mason. Maybe a free ride, a scholarship before Penn State takes them away from us, because not just the fact there were 4 sets of twins in my group, which kind of was interesting, but I enjoyed working with them. And not that I don't with our current students, but there's some fabulous, fabulous futures ahead of those girls. And I would love to honor them in some way from Mason.
Yeah, listen, thanks a lot for the question. Thanks a lot for your participation. Like you, I'm a fan. There's probably 2 ways to look at this that are somewhat complementary, right? I do think that we may be missing some opportunities to retain some of those students into our programs, right? And we probably should make better efforts to do that, and that's probably going to mean some additional investments, which is fine. You want to invest in your winning horses, right? And this is clearly, clearly one of ours. On the other hand, I am also comfortable with the notion that just by the work that you did over the summer with a group of girls, that we have rendered a service to society. Yeah. And that makes me proud, and we've had an impact, right? So I don't want to forget about that just because I'm not getting that enrollment. So I think we have to work on both ends. I think we want to reach more students, and in more disciplines. And as I mentioned, for example, in the case of ASIP, the business school is interested in coming in, right? And engineering has been tagging along for a while now. So I think this program can grow significantly. And like I said, I'm perfectly okay with serving society in that fashion. If we can keep more, absolutely, it should be a vehicle. So I think this is not either or, but both. And we need to work on the retention piece. And again, thank you, because this is a reality because of the individuals that participate in it. So that's how. And I get so much great feedback about ASIP. That's really incredible. So, and focus as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good afternoon. So my question is actually related to what a couple of other faculty asked, but more direct. We want to see the research portfolio of the College of Science increase, improve, so that there's more money brought in always. Associated with that is the standard teaching load that is actually published in places that is currently a turnoff to potential faculty that are high-performing faculty or aspiring faculty that are completing postdocs, so people looking to transition from one university to another. So when they look at George Mason as an R1, they see the teaching load, it turns them off for tenure track positions. How soon do you think the standard teaching load for tenure track faculty will be reduced to a 1-1, so that then we don't have to entertain this notion of the buyouts that you don't like?
Yeah. So great question. So definitely with incoming assistant professors, we're already doing it. And the question is, how can we sort of keep that going if they're research active? And so in terms of a time horizon, I would say I got 2+ years left in my first term. It's gotta happen before I finish my first term. Otherwise, I'm gonna tank. So that'll be my target. Yeah, to get it solved by then.
So we have time for one more question. I'm going to ask it from our virtual audience. If their question wasn't answered, I'll make sure I share them with you, Fernando, so you can take a look at them later.
Sure.
So this question is from Rebecca Jones. It's for faculty, but I'm hoping she doesn't mind if I include staff.
Okay.
What would you say to faculty and staff who feel undersupported or unsupported, underpaid, and discouraged? What would you say to College of Science faculty and staff who are considering leaving Mason or higher ed in general in the wake of the pandemic?
Listen, it's a very tough question. I thank you for asking it. Right. So what would I say? Right. So I'm trying to envision myself sitting down, having a cup of coffee with someone that's undergoing this, and just having a heart-to-heart conversation. Right. Definitely the underappreciation, underfunding, underpaid is not a perception. It's very real because we've looked at the numbers. It's a compound effect of some of the figures that I show you in terms of how Mason's funded. The other figure that I didn't quite share, but if you look at our endowment, so this is the amount of money that we have. Our endowment for Mason as a whole is about $300 million, okay? University of Virginia is upwards of $4 billion, right? So this tells you a little bit of where we are and how much we have to fundraise to get to a level that allows us to invest in these things. So we are definitely in a transition phase between being an underfunded, underpaid, extremely well-performing, because again, the numbers say so, institution, to being in a place where someone, like Rebecca or like many others, I'm sure, or the individual that Rebecca is representing when she asks this question, feels differently, right? What I vow to do is to try to move the needle. And Rebecca and everyone who's expecting this, we can't like overturn the whole thing in a couple years' time. This takes time because it's been 50 years in the making, right? But I say, if there's any part of you that has enjoyed your ride here, okay, there's lots of more of that excitement to come, and hopefully better compensated, better appreciated, and better served. And that's as honest as I can get on this. And thank you again. It's a privilege to serve as your dean.